are. It's the
It's not
start
even noon.
of the Super Bowl 2-week stretch. Ron and I have not processed or discussed the weekend. That's where we're going to start off to discuss the two games and look ahead for first thoughts on the Super Bowl ahead. How'd your weekend go, sir?
Well, it was almost as if I didn't wager, even though I had a lot of stuff. Thanks to our discussion a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I guess, and we've talked about it already. We were loaded with the Kansas City getting to the Super Bowl, which did hit, but it wasn't something that necessarily I wanted to hit because probably ended up losing about 1.5 units on Baltimore, even with the plus 500 ticket. Let's see, won on the props first game, lost on the props second game, small wager on the Lions, bigger wager on the over in the second game. Almost a wash overall. Maybe I made a sandwich. I don't know.
What was your method of hedging your Kansas City?
I took the easy way out. I just took the minus 180. So what I did is I had the plus 500 for half my bet, plus 525 for half the bet. And then I did the minus 180 and it came out where I would win probably about 2/3 of a unit if Kansas City won and about 2 units or so if Baltimore won. So I still wanted to make sure that Baltimore was the side I wanted because that's how I set it up to go.
Well, I did my hedge far more complicated.
Talk about it.
I ended up, because I don't like to hedge like you did. I don't want to buy back money line with money line and have no chance of winning with the head. So threw it in with a bunch of 3 Baltimore plus 3.5 alt line, handful of plus 7.5. And some various other odds and ends. And the worst case scenario was going to be actually if Kansas City won by more than 5. And fortunately, the game panned out where at the half they were up by 10 and the halftime line was 4.5. So I took a bunch of Kansas City plus 4.5 because if the score didn't change or they won the second half, I'm winning that money. And if Baltimore actually won, then I'm going to hit the mother load with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that was set up. And if that corridor didn't win, then the Baltimore bets that I had would have started to kick in. So, and then I get a dunce cap, well, a partial dunce cap, because on the final drive, they had Kansas City minus 3.5, basically minus 105, minus 110. And it was so good that it can't possibly be this good, because essentially that was putting me in a bet an unlimited amount of money right now and you can have all the money you want situation, because Jackson had the ball. If he throws a pick 6, all the money you want to bet in the world, that's going to win. If he doesn't score, that's going to win. And if he scores a touchdown, well, then I'm hitting my 1, 2, 3, which was a monster payday. So, and I did do really well in game, but boy, I could have really maximized. Just have to really have full awareness and in game, and you can get some really favorable situations sometimes.
Yeah. So my 2 thoughts here go back to the in game second. My first thought is I agree with you about not usually wanting to hedge the money line with the money line because you're compromising matters. And that for me would have been the case if KC was my pick all along. But I bet the KC knowing that I would like Baltimore in the final game. So it was a case of I needed to get off, but all of a sudden I get this extra money to get off, because if I didn't make the KC bet to begin with, then nothing's going on at all that way. I just have a straight Baltimore bet and I lose it. So I was actually putting myself in a good situation because of how much I like Kansas City the first 2 rounds. And those were golden rounds for me, but I just didn't like Kansas City. But the second thing that comes to mind with what you just said is that how much in-game betting is becoming a part of the handicapper's profile now. You told me, years ago, even up to last year and the year before, you weren't even watching these games. And now you've got to massage these games. You've got to look for these situations. They have player props during the middle of the game. They have, betting at all these commercials, even, and so on. You can make money this way if you're ahead of the algorithms, or you know what's going on, or if somebody's hurt or not hurt and it's not really taken into effect in terms of the lines. The lines are, I think they're kind of AI generated, and then they get bullied into place by bettors. So you can take advantage of certain situations, but that's hard work. And in a regular season scenario, it's too much for me to really want to do. I want to get more involved in it in game, but I also want to get less involved in game, if you know what I mean.
Well, my observations are in-game really depends on who you're in-gaming with. So FanDuel is, that's like a last desperation type thing. Maybe if you have an extra device and you can let them spin you around for 15 seconds and you don't care whether you get the bet or not. I did MGM over the last 2 weeks, and they are not bad. They're okay. And Caesars William Hill is probably the best. I don't recall ever getting declined. So that's really amazing. And I'm putting in four digit amounts, whereas, FanDuel is basically, you're lucky to get in a few hundred. So that's another good thing about it. The part of the end game that I really hadn't thought of before was we get I'm building these huge positions on games. And so I'm not really betting. In fact, I'm not using in-game at all on what I think is going to happen. For me, I'm playing against my positions and protecting my positions. I think I mentioned that previously. Yeah. So and that kind of works out well because the algorithms know what most people want to do based on, all their information and their data. And there's a fair amount of times where I'm kind of going the opposite way. So I like to be in positions where my team's winning by 7 and I can lay 6.5 minus 110 still. Like the halftime bet, my team's winning by 10 and they're getting, they're laying minus 5.5 essentially. So
yeah.
If you can get yourself in positions where you're already kind of in an advantage and things have to go against you, I think that's pretty good because most of the time you find yourself in game chasing positions where you're laying heavy juice, and you don't want to be doing that. So I think that's why. And my buddy actually kind of really drilled into me about tracking in game and exactly how the performance is going, and he's putting it into his spreadsheets and anally keeping track. And I don't have the time to do all that, but what I do have the time to do and what I think is important is after each game, I figure out how did I do? What did I do well? What can I learn from how I handled this game? So the Baltimore Kansas City game was just perfect. Every single thing I put in won, had a sizable return. The San Francisco Detroit game was not perfect, but it worked out fine. Because I had to protect against a Detroit blowout. So I did have to buy some San Francisco and such. A little bit of a bummer. I had San Francisco. Well, I did have San Francisco minus 5.5 plus 575 or something, which was a nice little backup. when they were down 3, I think, or something. I forget. Maybe they were down a touchdown. I forget when I got that, but that was a nice little backup because I knew they were going to get up by a touchdown, and I could buy it back, or it was just a nice little backup against my straight bet +7 because I fouled up and didn't get the 7.5.
So in your talk was a teaching moment again. And this is important for everybody who's listening. When we talk about the games during the week, Tuesday, Friday, when you're handicapping, when we're handicapping, we're creating narratives for ourselves. You're looking at your numbers, your models, your metrics. I'm looking at the matchup analysis, the situational analysis, my power ratings, and we have a game plan going in all the time. I think it's important not to have the same game plan when you're doing in-game betting. At least for me, if I were going and doing some in-game betting, what I would do is say, if this situation happens, this is what I'm going to do. So I know what the defense is going to be. Is there going to be a backdoor cover because the defense is soft against the pass? Is this quarterback that's in the game not going to be able to rally if they're down 3 or 10 points? I think just the way that we treat straight games, a teaching moment would be have a kind of game plan. If you're thinking of going in game, just don't go in spur of the moment and try to chase.
Yeah, for me. It's just about protecting positions. The games themselves are so unpredictable.
So thoughts on KC Baltimore?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. Well, let's go back to let's become painfully redundant with repeating. I don't know how many times over the last 2 years, I've said I ding Baltimore 1 point per game because of Harbaugh. You can absolutely depend on him to make mistakes and there's just something about him. He's, in my opinion, not even remotely. There's not even a remote second place. He's the most overrated coach in the NFL by far, in my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are, but
I think I drilled that into you about 3 or 4 years ago, and you've taken it and run with it. We see it all every year.
But I'm flabbergasted at Baltimore's every single aspect of that game. Flabbergasted at the preparation, the execution, the mental approach, the behavior, the lack of adjustments, the apathy. I can go on and on. Every single aspect of the way that game played out for Baltimore was almost a disaster. An incompetent, inept, immature, unprepared. I can't believe it. I really can't. I mean, think about it. They don't even sniff, winning the game. And how many points did Kansas City score in the second half? I mean, they scored on their 2 touchdowns in their first 2 possessions, right? And then a field goal. Did they score in the second half?
I do not recall them scoring in the second half.
So, and you can't even sniff a win? Come on.
Well, Edwards, his first carry was for 15 yards. I mean, it was a fantastic carry. His second carry came about 20 minutes later. It was ridiculous. Can you believe that Edwards and Justice Hill carried the ball a grand total of 6 times? And the game was it was 10 for a long time. And part of the problem was Baltimore's defense couldn't stop Mahomes on 3rd down or 4th down for that matter. I mean, Mahomes was sharp going in. We knew that. Yep. But the team that made adjustments in this game was not Baltimore like they had the previous week. They adjusted their offense. Kansas City's defense showed one thing in the first half, and then they didn't have to change, but they did change it around in the second half. They started blitzing Lamar Jackson. They said, hey, we're not going to let Baltimore make the adjustments. In my opinion, Kansas City said, we're going to make the defensive adjustments first. And it wasn't until almost garbage time and then getting a couple of breaks late that Baltimore was able to move the ball, and it was too late by then. They needed everything to go right, and everything didn't go right. They had the taunting call. They had the fumble in the end zone. They were their own worst enemy.
Did you? I don't understand. Your bread and butter is running the game, running the ball. They didn't run Jackson. Jackson didn't advocate for more rushes. You see these other quarterbacks. Mahomes will scream at Reed. Other quarterbacks have been known to do that. Brady used to scream at Belichick. Lamar's still very young. People forget. Is he even 25 yet?
He's roughly in the 25, 26 range, I think. He's been 5-6 years in the league.
But so Tucker was the only score in the second half. That's just amazing. So I thought my under was dead.
Yeah.
Early on, it looked like it was, but that's the way these Kansas City games have been. So
right.
But did you notice any adjustments that Baltimore made in the second half? What did they do?
Yeah, see, that's the problem. They didn't make any adjustments in the second half, where Kansas City said, okay, you're still going to let Pacheco run. Pacheco had 24 carries. Now, was he outstanding? No, but it enabled them to at least show the run, whereas Baltimore didn't, so that Mahomes could do his magic on the passing downs. I think Kansas City's defense was disrespected during the week, and they felt, hey, wait a second, we have probably the best pass defense left of the 4 teams that were still standing. And people forgot about that a little bit. And Baltimore, I don't know what their rhyme or reason was. We saw what Kansas City's game plan was. We're going to throw to Kelsey. We're going to throw to Rashid Rice because we know those guys got us here. We're not going to throw to anybody else. Yes, they threw to Scantling on the last play of the game, essentially, which was costly actually for me. But basically, they ignored every other person. As long as Kelsey was open and as long as Rice was open, they were going to go with their bread and butter. This is the difference, Chris. Baltimore never went with their bread and butter. They never went to Edwards. They never schemed for Jackson. They didn't try to go to their tight ends even, which is a bread and butter for them. 2 receptions for Andrews, 2 receptions or so for Likely. I mean, they basically strayed from what got them there.
I'm trying to figure this Kansas City out. Okay. Now we know that their end of the season schedule was not very favorable. Do you think that Kansas City is improving? Do you think that are you noticing a significant shift in what they're doing this postseason versus what they did in the regular season? And have you noticed a difference in previous years between what they're doing regular season and postseason? I do know that they obviously want to set up and have the personnel for postseason. So aside from that, are you noticing significant changes?
Yeah, something that's a great path to go on, because Kansas City's been streaky good and streaky bad in the past. They've regular season, postseason, last 5-6 years, you can count on them to go on a 5 or 6 game winning streak, and you can also count on them to be overvalued versus the spread. We've seen that a lot the last 2 years, where they win but they don't cover, and they're not quite as good as that. For me, the Week 18 reset changed everything. That was when they developed confidence in who they were. They said, okay, now we know Pacheco, he had a couple games he missed week 12, 13 with injury. He came back. Then there we go. We're going to feature him in the game. Rashid Rice became the clear number 1 wide receiver. Even Kelsey was banged up, but they knew they were going to go back to him. That week 18 reset allowed them, I think, to gain confidence. It's really a confidence builder. What do we do right? What do we do the best? What can we stray away from? Which players are no longer going to be part of our game plan? I think they just reset themselves and focused on their strengths and didn't try to force feed the ball to Tony, to Watson, to Sky Moore, to all these guys that they were sorting things out while Rice was a rookie the first 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks. Noah Gray, their backup tight end, got 5 targets. And he is a part of their game plan because he's more experienced and Mahomes has comfort level with him. I think they just found their comfort level, and now you see the real KC.
So you're not seeing anything noticeable. You wouldn't say that Reed has a sandbagging strategy
No.
or anything significant other than rest, reset, mental shift,
and
focus.
growing up with their team. I mean, the players they want to rely on are relatively young in their careers. Even Pacheco is only in his 3rd year, I think, 2nd or 3rd year. So you've got these very young guys. They just needed to reset, reevaluate, and kind of chart what they do well. And make no mistake, with 2 weeks, there's going to be something I want to save, but talk about a different show. Kansas City is going to have wrinkles in the Super Bowl. They always have wrinkles. They're going to have formations that San Francisco's never seen before. And now it's going to be, okay, they're dazzling. They're doing something different. Well, not really. They're just using the strengths, and they're creating new formations to use those strengths. I think you're going to see Kansas City do some significant game planning with different formations than they've used this season.
Do you give more credit to the Kansas City defense or more blame to the Baltimore offense slash their strategy on offense?
Cris, for not preparing, you're asking unbelievable questions. I think that's a good point. So I'm going to go 50-50 on this. Baltimore didn't look like Baltimore at all in that game. And maybe part of it was because Kansas City maybe baited them or said, hey, we're going to do this. Or maybe it's just because Mahomes was sharp. But Baltimore played to something that they weren't, and they never were in the game. If they would have stolen that game and won by 3 or 4 points, I think it would have been a misnomer to think that, oh, they woke up, they won the game, and so on. Kansas City just outplayed them and outcoached them.
Do you have any concern with the Kansas City offense getting shut down? Do you think that because it seems like it happens in most games, do you think that they just take the pedal off the metal because they've got plays in hand, they know what they can do when they have to do it, and they want to keep things vanilla if they're in control? What or do you?
Yeah.
I mean, do you see an effort shift based on the urgency from them from game to game?
So thinking about that, I think good to great football coaches play chess, and they don't play checkers one move at a time. So Andy Reid might run a play just like John Madden, just like the great coaches. They run a play in the first quarter with a formation with the idea that they're going to fool people in the 3rd or 4th quarter when they have that same formation, or they run the same play from a different formation. I think Andy Reid is setting things up. And do I have a concern as far as what's going on? I think, based on your question, I'm now just, and I don't know if this is the right thought or not, but maybe there's a little bit of Eric Bieniemy missing. Maybe they have a little missing of him. I know Andy Reid called the plays, but Eric Bieniemy also was a factor in saying, let's run this, let's run that. Him, Mahomes and Andy Reid, they were basically in sync in terms of what they were doing things. So what I think happened at that particular point is that maybe there's been a Bieniemy factor where they didn't have a comfort level completely with the offensive coordinator right now, and they're getting to that point right now. Something to chew on. Maybe listeners or viewers can chime in on this, but maybe there's a little of Bieniemy lost in that translation. In the chat, I see a question. Do you about the line? Do I see the line ending up at Pick'em by kickoff in 2 weeks? So we're going to get to that a little bit once Cris gets back online. But what I think in this particular case is there's always a reaction to what happened last. I see it in Democratic conventions, Republican conventions, whoever had the convention last. Cris, responding to the last question that's up on the chat, that's where you get the most push. So the thing first and foremost in play was the fact that, okay, San Francisco didn't look that good. Kansas City looked good. Kansas City has Mahomes. There's a Mahomes factor. The line immediately changed from 2.5 to 1. Question is, will it go to pick 'em? I think you're going to get pushback both ways. You're never going to see something close to 3 anymore. And I think the minute it goes to pick 'em, you're going to see San Francisco money. And you get a lot of public money. We discussed this a little bit last week. I don't have a feel for exactly where the line is going to end up. Cris, do you?
I want to talk about that, but I'm curious. You said you were going to buy us 2 seats here. Can we confirm one of these here?
We're going to buy us 2 seats.
Yeah,
how much
for
is
the
it?
Super Bowl?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a seat in my living room.
You want to go for these $55,000 seats, or are you going to cheap out at the 44,000 seats?
No, I'm going to do what I did as a teenager, and I'm going to stand outside the stadium, and then somebody's just going to give me Dodger tickets or Angel tickets. I'm going to walk in.
Nice.
Hector has a question about the props, and I know we're going to get to that, and not on this show and so on. But in the past, I can go on a rant about props right now, because the industry has changed completely in the last 365 days. But I will say this. I tend to play a lot of cross-sport props. I tend to play a lot of individual props. I tend to play props where books have not put up those type of props during the year, because they're going to leave something loose. They're not as good at setting props in the Super Bowl because they haven't set these 400 props during the regular season. So I'm all over the place in terms of what props that I actually play in the Super Bowl.
I wanted to thank Tommy Lorenzo for promoting the show for us and his comments.
Thank you.
He's got a nice little pod that I listen to every week where he mixes in different sports and seems to be doing pretty well.
I'm going to write that down. Check you out, Tommy.
The line, I've heard too many people surprise San Francisco as favored. So, I mean, there's a few people that really like San Francisco, but it seems like, and this is, we're going to have to talk about this, because how do you factor in the Mahomes Reed competency into these lines? Because at some point it's going to be, even though New England had all those overinflated lines for years, they still covered.
Yeah.
There's a groundswell of, you can't bet against Mahomes and Reed. And at some point, these lines are going to be wrong. I haven't seen that happen yet, though. But it just seems like there's a groundswell of people that want to bet on Mahomes, are sick and tired of losing, betting against them, and they're done. They've just been beaten down, and they're ready to hop on board the Mahomes and Reed bus. What do you think? How much is that factoring into your handicap, and do you think it's changing the lines at all yet?
I think the point about New England lends me to what I'll be processing during this week as I formulate the matchups in this game. New England's lines, to a certain extent, were inflated, but to a certain extent, they were not as inflated as people think, because there's actually a component of the game that people forget about, and that's defense. And when Bill Belichick had the most experienced defense that he had, with all those linebackers that are now head coaches, Vrabel, Mayo, so on and so forth. When he had the McCourty brothers and other people in the secondary, Harrison and so on, people forgot how proficient this team was in defending the pass. And we all know that it's easier to move down the field via the pass than the run. And even teams like Baltimore abandon the run to go to the pass. Once you're behind, teams have this mentality, I got to catch up. So I think the first thing one should do in the San Francisco, Kansas City handicap matchup is not just focus on Mahomes, but focus on the defenses. And if you feel that one defense is better than another, then that has to be part of your analysis and where you think the line might be off, or maybe the line is not off. I think people forget about how defense comes into play with matchup analysis.
And why do you focus on the defenses?
Well, it's not that I focus totally on the defense. It's that I feel that some people focus not enough on the defense. To me, it's 40% offense. I'm just taking numbers out the air. 40% offense, 40% defense, 20% special teams. To other people, I feel like it's 60, 30, 10, if they even think about special teams. I think that's where the money has been made during the season, when you know that one team's special team play is bottom 5 or top 5. I've said this to you, Chris. I don't care if a team is rated 18th in special team defense or 9th in special team defense. What I care about is who the bottom 5 are and who the top 5 are. And that's the same that I care about in almost every statistic that I look at. Where's the gap? Is there a gap between the 5th best defense and the 6th best defense? Is there a gap between the 9th best defense and the 10th best defense? I look for gaps, and then I concentrate on the part that might be a standard deviation off from the mean, to put in a statistical term or something like that. I don't care about that 12 to 22 range or something like that. And that's where I think people get fooled by the fact that they're not concentrating as much on defense. But no, Chris, I also focus on the offense just as much on the defense. I just think people aren't focusing on them 50-50 as they should.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, back in the day, we always used to go with the team with the better defense, and
yeah,
that's just shifted.
I understand that, because I gave you a stat that was still relevant when New England played the Rams, and it was why New England was my second biggest bet ever in the Super Bowl. It was obvious to me that New England was going to shut down the passing game of the Rams. Absolutely obvious. And 21 of the 22 Super Bowls, counting New England, pass defense was the most relevant stat to winning the Super Bowl.
Right.
Absolutely the most relevant. And you are absolutely right, with rule changes, with the way people call penalties, with where you can hit a player, whether you can touch a player, whether you can touch a quarterback on a sack or not touch a quarterback on the sack. That kind of shifted things. And that statistic, it's a low sample size. It's only been 4 or 5 years, but that statistic is practically out the window right now, because pass defenses are allowing more completions than they ever have before. So games adjust, teams adjust, strategies adjust, rules adjust. But you're right. There is a shift in wanting more offense, because they want football to sell on TV. They do not want this. The NFL does not want a 10-7 Super Bowl.
Well, the last 10 Super Bowl matches have featured 2 offensive head coaches. There hasn't been a defensive-minded head coach over the last 10 Super Bowls. Something to consider there. I think we've had 3 underdogs in a row, Cash.
Yeah. Some of them have been short underdogs. I mean, we've had Super Bowls where they've been really under a field goal.
We haven't had a double digit. We haven't had a spread over 5. We haven't had a spread over 5 since 2008. That was 6.5, and then the year before that were the Patriots and the Giants.
Yeah.
So we've had some close matchups. And then one thing that I noticed on the totals, because we're going to discuss, we're discussing where the line moves. Do you have any grasp on where you think this total is going to go?
I just have a feeling that it'll go edge up a little bit. I know a lot of people are going to say, okay, let's bet the over in the first half and the under in the second half because of KC's tendencies, which are, it's kind of weird because most games, if you want to bet which half will be higher, you always have to pay a price for the second half because of chase mode and everything else. But Kansas City games have been against the norm with that, where the unders have been hitting in the second half. But my initial indication is people want scoring. They set the number at a certain level. San Francisco's defense has been a little bit more vulnerable lately. You've got Mahomes in the game. I have a feeling it goes up.
So, how many Super Bowls since 2011 have had a total under 47?
2. 1. Yeah. It's usually been in the 50 to 55 range, I'd say.
You have, since 2004, you have 2 totals that have been under 47. No, I'm sorry, there was a 46 and a half here. So it's an unusual number here. It's right there. You don't see totals go any lower than that usually.
Yeah, I'm not saying bet the over or bet the under, but it's just a feeling that it'll go up.
You've got, and this is one of the few instances. There was some debate over people lecturing that you're an idiot if you don't understand how valuable bet percentages are. That's a whole nother discussion we could have for an hour. But
yeah,
in the one way that I do find a benefit from bet percentages is not whether who wins or loses, but more where's this line going to go. So when I see 94% of the money on the over, then I've got to believe it's going to pretty much be bottomed out, you would think at this point. As far as analyzing, I'm not so sure. We saw how crappy that San Francisco defense is, and we know that both teams can score. So I can see people, wanting to get behind that over. But both of these teams also have an ability to really grind it out, extend drives, burn clock. So I could make a strong case for over or under at this point. What about you?
Yeah, I think we have to delve into the matchups more. And one of the things that I will delve into during the week is game planning. Is San Francisco going to design a game plan that protects Purdy from harm? You don't want your quarterback to lose the game and lose confidence early. And Purdy almost had that happen in the Detroit game. So you have to be a little bit careful in terms of how to design the game plan. So if I feel San Francisco is going to design a protective game plan for Purdy, that's going to lend itself more for the unders. If I think that Kansas City is going to try to exploit something of San Francisco's defense, that might lean me a different way. So it's part of the pre-analysis. I'm not ready to form an opinion over or under right now.
No, me either. I don't think Lamar Jackson had any input into how often they were throwing or running. I think that those are coaching decisions.
Well, one thing that happened that was a little bit surprising early is how little Baltimore had the ball. Baltimore's defense couldn't get off the field on 3rd and 4th down. So when Lamar Jackson took the field and went 3 and out or 4 and out, there was no rhythm, no consistency, no chess match to set up the next drive or the next play or what we want to do on the next first down. They didn't have that opportunity. They had the ball 9 minutes in the first half. And for a long time, it was something like 15-5 in terms of time of possession. So you're talking about a team that never got in rhythm. So I just don't think they were prepared to figure out what to do. and it cost them.
Am I in black screen?
You are in black screen. You do not want to show your face today, so I don't know.
I
don't know
I
what
can
it
pick
is.
my nose at
You
freely now,
could
so.
do whatever you want behind the screen. You could wave your hands. You could do all these different things. Let's talk a little bit about Detroit and San Francisco, because I know we want to get to Ben Johnson question that's in the chat as well.
Are we done? Are we done with Baltimore and
I think so. I think that's good enough for the post analysis of that one.
I'm going to back myself out and come back in, see if that gets my video back. Why don't you go ahead and start babbling?
Okay. Can you hear me when I talk, though? Maybe, maybe not. So let's talk Detroit, San Francisco right now. One of the things I noticed from San Francisco when they played Green Bay is they were surprisingly ineffective against the run. Aaron Jones, if you remember, he ran for over 100 yards, the first time in 50 plus games that a running back had gained over 100 yards against San Francisco. And now San Francisco plays the Lions, and the Lions ran for 182 yards, and they were especially effective in the first half. If I remember correctly, the Lions had 144 yards in the first half. And they were just running. Goff, he was running. The running backs, both running backs, Montgomery and Gibbs, were having success on the ground. And then you had the play, the controlled aggression, as I called it, from Ben Johnson, when they had their running back, their wide receiver, Jamison Williams, run for that 42-yard touchdown. So even taking that out of the equation, they were still running over 5 yards per carry on San Francisco. And that was a warning time, because the Lions were one step ahead in terms of how they were game planning offensively. San Francisco was behind the curve on defense. Detroit was taking it to them. And Chris, if you heard me, the Lions had about 144 yards running in the first half, but they didn't have as many yards running in the second half. And that was partly because of the fumbles and partly because San Francisco was finding a rhythm offensively.
That was definitely a tale of two halves. I heard on the radio Purdy ran for 50 yards in the second half, had 132 passer rating, and was 13 for 16. So, not that we've ever really knocked Purdy, but we've kind of said that I think we felt that he was a little overvalued. But he had an incredible performance. I can't believe some of the stuff he pulled off. Some of it, the ineptness from the Detroit defense, but some of the stuff he did was certainly undeniably, excellent. So kudos to him. He definitely did extremely well.
Yeah, I think with Purdy and with San Francisco, they had to have the feeling that, hey, this is a Lions defense that is vulnerable. As long as Purdy doesn't lose the game on interceptions, on stupid plays, on doing something, he will have the opportunity later on to win the game, with the caveat being he will only have the opportunity to win the game if San Francisco's defense plays better, because they certainly didn't come to play in the first half. What I liked about San Francisco is that they have McCaffrey. We talk about Kansas City. Kansas City has Mahomes, Baltimore doesn't. Well, San Francisco has McCaffrey, and the Lions, they don't have McCaffrey. And so even when they were down 24-7, they were still using McCaffrey. He was still running the ball, 11 times in the first half, for example. Maybe he wasn't getting the yardage, but once things started to go in their favor, he's tough to bring down. He has 4 rushing touchdowns. He has 300 and some total yards, I think, 188 yards plus 11 receptions. Everybody knows the ball's going to him. Everybody knows the ball's going to some of their other guys, but it's hard to stop that guy.
Yeah, he was getting an extra 2 to 3 yards quite often. I would say more than 50% of his runs, he was getting an extra 2 to 3 yards. It was something. The Lions went the entire season without allowing a running back to hit 100 yards. McCaffrey hit 90 yesterday, and that prop that I liked with the over receiving yards came in exactly the way I thought it would, pass out to the left, and a big gainer for most of it. But I thought he would have had one more big gainer.
Mm-hmm. See, San Francisco's offense, they're fine. And they were able to put Debo in, make him somewhat effective, ran him more than I thought they would run him because I thought they would still try to protect him there and they would just use him on the short screens or the short outs and stuff like that. Use Kittle when they needed to. People forgot Kyle Hustek's on the team, but when it's crunch time, Kyle Hustek gets action. And so I appreciated that. And he was wide open on a couple of those passes. And I think that's something just to keep in the back of your mind, that do not be surprised if Hustek's the one who barrels in for a 1-yard touchdown at any particular time. Although it's tough. You got McCaffrey. You never want to take the ball out of his hands. What I didn't like about San Francisco is, and we're probably going to talk about kicking, even though we shouldn't, about the Lions. But the San Francisco rookie kicker, I've always been of the mindset that you want the first kick for a rookie or a quarterback or a kicker with less confidence to have their first kick be an extra point or a 25-yard kick, not a 48-yard kick. And it was very easy, in my opinion, to predict that Moody would miss that first kick. And now he has 2 misses in 2 games in the postseason. So we need to keep that in mind, that kicking is not automatic, especially in San Francisco. I don't know. I guess the roof will be closed in Vegas, but still, don't automatically trust these kickers, especially with their first kick in a game.
Well, we mentioned it. When you have Justin Tucker only making 86.5% of field goals, that tells you field goals are definitely not automatic. As far as the Lions go, I think there's a little bit too much blame being put on Campbell. There's a lot of things that went wrong with the Lions. There was some bad luck. I mean, bouncing off the helmet for 51 yards on the 1-yard line. That was ridiculous. Reynolds dropping those 2 balls, though, was, in my opinion, just the backbreaker.
Yeah.
There was 1 4th down that they went for where they were running it down their throat, and they tried to pass the ball for the 2 yards, and Reynolds dropped the ball. I was disappointed with how that mapped out.
I want to point out that on the other unfinished 4th down, Reynolds came open right in front of Goff, and Goff said, "I'm not throwing to him," and he went deeper to St. Brown. At that moment, I wish for the Lions that Jamison Williams was running that route and not Reynolds, because if he wasn't going to throw to him anyway, why is he in the game?
And I don't think people realized how poor. See, obviously I'm a Lions fan, and the people that I interact with are just crushed by this loss. And I've got the opposite. I'm like just beaming because I think they overachieved. I think the ascent was too rapid. They have the 3rd youngest team in the league, and they had huge holes. Field goal kicker, awful. Secondary, awful. You're not supposed to go to the Super Bowl with a team, with those, issues. So I just didn't want to see them embarrass themselves, and they didn't. They gave up a big lead, but you know what? The nature of the NFL and NBA and baseball, all of these sports, we grew up seeing how games played out, and we would all gravitate mentally to what deficit determined the game was never coming back. But over the last 5, 6, 7 years, highlight after highlight of improbable comeback after improbable comeback, choke job, meltdowns, gives, I think, more teams, more players, a longer leash of being able to hold on to hope and confidence that they can come back. And I think that that's why you see a lot more of this happen. I don't think San Francisco was concerned that they couldn't come back at the half. And I don't think the Lions thought that they had it in the bag. I didn't think we had it in the bag. It never at one point, not even for a little tiny bit, did I ever think, oh, the Lions are going to the Super Bowl. We've seen these stories before. So,
yeah. No, I think with the Lions, for some, I was pretty calm. I thought the Lions would score at the end, and I think that's more a reflection of San Francisco and a concern about San Francisco that they gave up that last touchdown so easily. Lions could have managed the clock a lot better, and I did write about that. But still, I did not have the feeling that this game was going to end 10 points because there's still something a little wrong about San Francisco.
yeah.
Two things I would change that I want to get your opinion on if I had to do Detroit over, and it was nothing about the fourth down calls. I don't even want to hear anything about the fourth down calls. They were 50-50. I would have had Gibbs more involved in the passing game. Gibbs in space against the San Francisco backline defenders and linebackers, for that matter, in pass coverage was a mismatch. I saw on a couple plays how Gibbs got to the corner and he was able to stretch a first down run. Whether
they kept giving him the ball, and they kept handing it off, and he was getting pummeled. I was actually
that was straight up the middle. What you want is Gibbs in space.
They were running him outside to the right also, and he was getting stuffed.
But what about getting him out in space in the pass game? I would have liked to see more in the pass game. And, they had the good play with Jamison Williams right away, but they didn't really try to get him deep. I mean, he has too much speed for the San Francisco guys. I still would have mixed him up and had him go deep in this particular game. I understand the game plan is very similar to KC, by the way, Chris, where they went to their go-to guys. St. Brown and Laporta had all those catches, and they had 24 targets, 16 catches, 24 targets. I understand that. But Jamison Williams, and I wrote about this in pregame, this is why you got him here, to do something to take advantage of the San Francisco secondary. I loved a lot of what Detroit did on offense, but those are the two things I would have done differently. More Jamison Williams downfield and more Gibbs in the pass game.
Yeah, it's a shame they had was it the flea flicker or similar type play? And it was just a shame that Goff couldn't get him the ball. I'm not sure how that how he missed it so bad. I know it had to do with some pressure or something, but
that was the controlled aggression. That was the controlled aggression I wrote about beforehand, and I thought Detroit had a great game plan to start with.
Yeah, it was, and the moment was not too big for them. The only thing that I might have done differently is I think I would have kicked the field goal to tie it rather than go for that fourth down. But
I understand that, but it was less than 3 yards, I believe. And there was a stat that is unconfirmed because I only read it on the internet. What were they? Something like 15 of 22 or something, converting 4th and 3 during the season, 17 of 22. 17 of 22 is what I heard.
Conversions are just league average. So they don't convert at any, super high rate. They just go for it more often.
Yeah. One more thing on San Francisco I want to mention, because they're the ones advancing and going to the Super Bowl. And this is something Hector brought up in his comment. You can focus on that. I don't know what Chase Young brings to the table if he's going to run at 12% efficiency. I mean, I rewound that play after I saw somebody tweet it out. And that guy literally, you could walk backwards faster than the way he was chasing that play. This was an absolutely, I don't know, I wouldn't even re-sign him the next year if I had that option based on that. If I were a coach on that team, I wish I would have the Eric Bieniemy mentality right now that the offensive coordinator of Washington and formerly Kansas City had. I would be in Chase's young face and say, I'm not even playing you if you're going to do this. I would be in his face and I would be ripping him apart.
Yeah, he was already being ridiculed before that game, and it was pretty bad. So I don't know what they're going to do with that guy. So do you? I don't know. We were saying it before the playoffs even started that San Francisco's defense had a huge drop off. You know, it was painfully obvious that their defense had become average. Now, some aspects of their defense, it's pretty impressive. Obviously, still, I mean, but there's just clear weakness there. It's how much of a concern is this going to be for you, or you haven't figured it out? You just haven't even started to really evaluate it.
This is part of the 2 weeks you have to either watch reruns of other shows, get involved in Korean dramas, which are excellent, or study the NFL. So one of the things I'm going to be doing, especially this year, because we talked about it during the year, how many quarterbacks started a game in the NFL? Something like 63, 64. How many NFL-worthy quarterbacks started a game in the NFL? Maybe half of that. I mean, we have some really bad quarterbacks. So, Cris, one of my homework assignments is to chart out how many times Kansas City faced quarterbacks that were substandard, how many times San Francisco faced quarterbacks that were substandard. Throw that completely out the window and concentrate on what was San Francisco's defense like when they faced NFL starting quarterback caliber players, because Mahomes falls into that realm, obviously. I don't want to chart how San Francisco did against Tommy DeVito. I'm throwing that out. I will chart how he did against Baker Mayfield. I'll chart how he did against quarterbacks like Derek Carr. I will chart how he did against quarterbacks, of that nature. Geno Smith, I'm fine charting that out, but I'm not charting the DeVitos of the world. And from there, I will form an analysis.
And then obviously we have to factor in the games that McCaffrey or Williams sat out, or Samuel, Trent Williams, because that makes a difference, obviously, also.
Yeah. What about you? How did you feel about that? What I just said. As far as are you doing anything different in terms of your analysis? Are you going to tweak your metrics for certain things, whether it be just playoff, last five, against certain teams? Are you going to work with your numbers at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out is I want to see where this line moves. I want to see what the mood is. I think that my approach on this is going to be chasing gimmicks of some sort. For me, Super Bowl betting is about the alternate lines. It's about, I think, to answer the question earlier about where are these lines going to end up? If I had to guess, I think the total probably ends up at 48 and a half. I think that San Francisco bettors, smart ones, are biting their fingernails and holding off betting them because of distant hope that Kansas City can flip to the favorite and people can start teasing San Francisco. So I think it's possible. I mean, the hope of professionals is to be able to tease both sides of this game. It seems to me that it's very unlikely that either of these teams are going to blow out the other. It should be a close game. So teasing and alternate lines are going to be the route. I think that this line, it's basically a pick now or a week one. I think it possibly could see one in some places, the other direction. I'm not sure. I've heard a lot of people that are supporting Kansas City, so I just don't know. I don't feel like I've absorbed a wide enough net of input to really. That could just be a skew, variance. So,
Mm-hmm. I think it's experimentation time, not only, looking at the lines, the alternates and stuff like that, which I don't do regular season, but experimenting with strategies as far as how did Kansas City do against this type of quarterback? How did San Francisco do against this type of quarterback? Because Mahomes is capable of extending plays, and now we saw Purdy capable of extending plays. So I want to see what their tendencies are when they play statue quarterbacks versus when they play more mobile quarterbacks. What's their tendencies against tight ends? Because we've got two of the best in the business in this game. We've got Kittle and we've got Kelsey. What are they going to do against those tight ends? Because it's a different dynamic in a lot of ways. I don't know if you remember this, but I talk about the I know you remember about how I talk about the importance of rookie quarterbacks having that tight end for that larger catch radius. But there's also a strong correlation between teams that make it deep in the playoffs and who they have at tight end. And we're seeing this time and time again. The best tight ends in the NFL matter because those teams win.
I'm just looking up some passing information.
Yeah. It's data collection time the next 72 hours.
How good is I'm trying to. They give you so many different options here. It just seems like even if Purdy plays a great game, I just feel like he's primed for an interception, and his interceptions are always like at a half. I just want to go over. Where do you think that'll be lined? How good is that Kansas City defense in getting picks?
Well, the beauty of the Kansas City defense is that they focus on defending the pass better than they defend the run. And in the regular season, it gets them into trouble. In the postseason, you could have one of these. What was his name? Tommy Smith, or I can't remember the guy, Washington running back who ran for 200 yards out of the blue. I mean, you get these guys that dominate on the ground in the Super Bowl if you don't watch out. But the bottom line is San Francisco does a really good job in press coverage when they need to with their cornerbacks. And so that's why I think the game plan that they designed for Purdy is maybe one of the most important strategies to consider in this one, because I would probably line it at a minus 130 to minus 135 off the top of my head. Yes, interception for Purdy. Let me give you a stat for, and it wasn't Purdy, it was Jimmy G. But I'm going to give you a stat. I don't want to go too in deep in this. I'll write about it. But Kansas City and San Francisco played in the Super Bowl 4 years ago, right? Each quarterback threw 2 interceptions in that game, just to let you know. And that means Mahomes threw 2 interceptions in that game.
He doesn't throw many.
It comes in bunches. If he throws, he tends to go 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 2, 0, 2, that kind of thing.
That line was Kansas City minus 1.5. Total was 52.5. And Kansas City won by 11.
So Tommy says the Purdy interception is roughly around, 109 at Caesars. So that's pretty much implying that if he played 21 games, he would have an interception in 11 games and not an interception in 10 games. So I would say if I think it should be priced 135, 140, you probably have a certain ROI involved in the sample size there that would be worth a 110 bet. So what I chart out is I chart out how many attempts I think he's going to have. Like Mahomes, I had 40 attempts last week. So I thought he might throw an interception last week. He didn't against the Baltimore defense, and I was wrong about that. But I was right that he would throw the ball at least 40 times. So the question with Purdy is, how many times do you think he's going to throw? And that number typically comes out about 30. So you're not going to get as many pass attempts out of Purdy unless you think they're going to be coming from behind. And even if they're coming from behind, they tend to not deviate from their game plan like Baltimore did. They're going to be still giving the ball to McCaffrey.
Well, he threw 11 picks, so that's a little bit more often than every other.
Yeah, you have to go game by game because I think there was one game he had 3 or 4.
Yeah, he did.
So it's a little tricky analysis. You can't just go by the number.
Well, I'm always looking for the easy way out, Ron.
Yeah. I'm not teasing, but if I were teasing, I would tease to the over because you could get, if you can knock it down any way that you can knock it to 40.5 under the 41, it seems like a decent number in a dome.
I did something.
Can you tease the first half? Can you tease the first half?
No. But you know what I did on the San Francisco-Detroit game? I actually did a 4-team teaser and won it. Hello? You there?
I'm here.
A 14 teaser and it won. I
think the best thing for me to do is not comment about that.
I had the San Francisco and Detroit, which middled, and I had the over, which obviously won, and I had the under 65.5, and it landed 65. So it worked out well. But what people would want to do is try to tease both sides of this game. And what I did with what I didn't mention with my hedging on to get the Baltimore plus 3.5s and not have to pay minus 330 and minus 340 at Bookmaker, they have favorable basketball teasers. And so whatever basketball that we intended on playing, and you can't just do it randomly. There's a set of numbers that you have to follow. But so we had NCAA basketball games, and if it fit a good teaser corridor criteria, then we would use the basketball into the Baltimore plus 3.5. And then alternatively, you can parlay alternate lines similar to teaser fashion. So if I'm referencing wanting to tease or that basically is synonymous with, being able to parlay alternate lines also. So a lot of, I probably think that I will probably have 20 or 30 teasers into the Super Bowl for sure. From that'll lead off from bets, either teasers or parlay legs from games I'm going to be betting anyway. And the way that I mentally approach that is technically you're paying the price anyway, usually, but I want to put myself in a position of risking less. So we had a ton of Baltimore plus 3.5 that cost 330 to 355, but when it was all said and done for, our average price into those was about 150 minus 155. So that's my goal, is to shift what my risk is on those expensive alternate lines. So you're trading off value. There's no miracle gain in doing this unless you're getting bad numbers or bad prices that you can use. The other thing that I was doing on the Baltimore game, you know what? And I looked through it. Here's something that's changed. Usually, nearly all the alternates you find are pretty shitty, and you're just really finding that one diamond in the rough. And there were very, very fair teaser prices almost across alternate line prices across the board yesterday when I was combing all the different places and their alternate line prices. I'm like, wow, they're actually reasonable on this, because traditionally you look at those pull downs at Caesars, FanDuel, DraftKings, and most of those prices are just complete garbage. Unless they make an error, you're not finding something. And that wasn't the case. I found a lot of situations where there was significant value on their prices that they were offering. So, but one of the strange things I was doing is I found a really, really, FanDuel had a really great price on Baltimore minus 9.5 at plus 190. So I started, and I wanted San Francisco. So what I was doing was taking the minus 9 plus the 160. And I obviously I don't have to bet as much as I do on the other side, and because I'm getting the plus 160, and I was just teasing into San Francisco because I didn't own any San Francisco. I'd already bet Detroit up the wazoo. And even if I didn't own any Detroit, I knew for a fact that, okay, well, let's just get by this, and I'll have the San Francisco, and I'll take plus 7.5, or I'll figure out something to work into getting that San Francisco pick. And the beautiful thing about it is I was teasing the Kansas City plus 11.5. I'm laying minus 9.5. That had a potential of middling both of those directions also. So you can get, if you can get creative with those alternate lines, tying them into teasers and parlays into, different stuff. So it's hard to explain. Probably just confused all you guys more, but that's some of the stuff I was doing.
So that's a tease tutorial, which is not what I'm going to be doing. So I'm just going to do this once because I'm not going to give out too many trade secrets here. But this is where cross-sport props come into play. Because if you don't like a line, let's say you want somebody over or under 2.5 receptions, or will somebody score a TD, or how many completions somebody has, that kind of thing. But the juice is getting up there. If you tie it to a cross-sport prop, typically you're going to be back in the minus 10 to minus 115 range. You're not going to be minus 130, minus 140, and so on. Believe it or not, a sport that I don't know anything about, but I can find outliers on, would be soccer. Typically, you have total goals 2.5. You have total this. I mean, everything's a pretty set number. Total goals in a game is whatever. Total goals for a team is something like that. I look at outlier soccer props, or I look at okay soccer props and outlier juice for the player props on receptions, and you team that up. And the beauty of that, or number of birdies on the 4th round of whatever golf tournament is going on, the beauty of that is every single one of these things is finished 2 or 3 hours before the Super Bowl starts.
Right.
And what you get from that is the ability to middle, the ability to do a lot of different things, because you already know if I don't know the golfers' names anymore. Jordan Spieth had 5 birdies. And you had him having more birdies than somebody had catches, you might have some value in terms of middling that way. Or if a game had 2.5 goals and they scored 5 goals, and then you're sitting on a total for a number of receptions for one of the lesser known wide receivers, you've got something going there. And I usually set up between 10 and 15 situations tied to soccer and other sports before the game. I think cross sport props are an underrated way to find some value.
Yeah, it's not necessarily negative EV to tease totals. It's there's some history. A lot of teaser data has not been updated that people spout off. There was a notable live stream where the host said something that was 100% wrong, but treated it like it was fact. And I'm seeing that quite often. People, going off of teaser data from 2014 and thinking it never changes. So there's surprising totals teaser data out there that's been researched. But in general, you're not going to be chasing totals. I tease. I take big positions on totals that I know or I think are going to move, and once they've moved, then I oftentimes am buying that extra to tease back and go for the middles. On 10-point teasers, and that worked out really well the last 2 weeks. I think every one of them hit. It's tricky. It's more complicated than that, but that's it in a nutshell. But my intention is to have both teams plus 7.5 going both directions, and I'm going to do that by either teasers or parlaying alternate lines, and I'm going to probably find a way to use cross sport parlays, teasers, and you can't do the basketball teasers just anywhere, because most basketball places are going to give you 4.5 points as a base. You can't do it. Bookmaker starts you at 5.5. Big difference. So we have not bet the coin toss, but do you bet the coin toss at all? If I got plus 101, I would.
National anthem only. Coin toss is for people that want an instant win or loss before the game starts. Of course, so do I with the national anthem, but I actually do research on that, which is sick. But what else do I have to do? Football's over.
I'm going to do something with the total. I'm going to take position in the total with the intention of trying to middle the total on a teaser. So I'm already taking positions on the total, and we'll get off of it by teasing it back, or parlaying it back on an alt line total.
This is the disclaimer part of the handicapping show, where always play within your reason. Don't end up having a portfolio where all of a sudden, wow, I have 17 things tied to McCaffrey. What if he doesn't get it done? I'm 0-17 right away. Make sure you understand what your risk is per player, per team. If you're doing what Cris is suggesting with teases and alternate lines, add up the units you put, because I don't think Cris would ever put himself in a position to all of a sudden have 9 units risk if something goes wrong, when his regular size bet might be 2 or 3 or 4 units. So you better have kind of a Excel chart or something to know what you're doing. I know I have to do that with props because there's so many things going on, and I want to make sure that I'm not too top heavy one way, shape, or form with some of these things. And that's why I appreciate the 2 or 3 hours before the Super Bowl starts, where I can already grade what some of the cross sports have done.
We had 25 teasers and parlays going into the Kansas City Baltimore game. They were all closing on it. So just needed a result in that game. So specific goals, know exactly how much I have on it, and but there are times when there was 1 week this past year where I wasn't keeping. I was a little careless and was, picking off some good numbers here and some good combos here because I've got a lot of shops. I like to give them a little action here, a little action there, and um, I didn't realize how much it had been adding up, and the liability was just absurd on a couple of teams. And I'm like, holy shit, you gotta gotta make sure you're writing this down as you go because it just adds up so fast.
Yeah, you don't want to ruin a good week or a good season or whatever with one careless thing. It's different when you have to take your money and put it over the counter and hand it to a ticket writer as opposed to punching a button on a computer.
I'm trying to see.
Yeah, Purdy had a lot of turnover-worthy plays against Green Bay. So something to keep in mind.
I don't have the line history of open and close handy at the moment. I just have the. Let's see.
Playing devil's advocate, would it be valuable because public money influences Super Bowls? I'm not sure it would be valuable.
What would be valuable?
Opening and closing numbers for trends or tendencies.
You're barely getting up to a large enough sample size, and in my opinion, I don't even bother to look at any pre-2016 stuff anymore. So we don't even have 10 years of what I consider data that I actually work with anymore.
Yeah. There's enough to chart out without adding more things, I think. So
Josh Allen had only 2 more turnover-worthy passes than Purdy this year, and Purdy played 1 less game. Variance will catch up with Purdy. I agree. I mean, Purdy got away with a lot of stuff this year.
It'll be interesting. I mean, that's next few days, do some matchup analysis. I don't think we'll have a show this Friday, but next Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday or whatever day we're getting together, we could have at it again.
Yeah, we'll get together and see what we've come up with. I like this Monday, but I would say next Monday or Tuesday we'll come back and update our thoughts. But I think I've said where my goals are. My goals are. I'm not. You're going to chase the actual props. We should work together in tandem. I've got so many different accounts.
Yeah, I'm going to do the matchup analysis, see where I think one team has an edge or another team has an edge. Then look at the props. I'll just say this real quickly. DraftKings and FanDuel have really ruined the prop market for me. And it's causing me to take a second and third look at how I can better use my time next year. Because I hate the fact that they're out. Even some of their props are out now on players. It used to be you waited for the guys in Vegas to put up the Friday sheets and everything would come out then. And then you'd have all these differences from South Point and from Westgate and everybody else. It's a mess right now. So I will probably strategize more for cross-sport props than I will on the actual players because there are some things in the prop market that have made it harder to win on. Let's just put it that way.
Are you, in case anybody is not aware of it, the public loves to bet or overs, and the public likes to take plus money. So For years and years and years, I basically just twiddled my thumbs until Thursday, Friday, Saturday, mainly just Saturday, the day before the Super Bowl. And then Sunday was just a madhouse.
I know. I remember that.
And but my goal was always I'm laying the big prices because the public will bring we'll keep buying that plus money, plus money, plus money. And at some point, a lot of the plus money propositions end up being great value. Do you take any positions on the over on props, knowing that you're going to want to buy some back later?
Well, here's the thing. You have the recreational thing there. Have I taken positions already? That's what I hate about this, that you have to look at this on a Monday as opposed to waiting on Friday. I've taken no positions because I strongly disagree with the market coming out so early. And the main places that I play living in California have not come out with it. So I don't want to get into all this on Sunday and Monday and be reactionary to something. I want to have time to digest the matchup. So I haven't done that. Super Bowl is different for me because I'm mostly an under player for props. It's been profitable, as I've said on many shows, but the Super Bowl is different. A lot of overs hit. You have to have a mixed portfolio in the Super Bowl. You absolutely have to have overs because that's just the way it goes. I think we got a glimpse of how the Super Bowl might play out with the last week when a lot of these teams went to their money men. They went to Laporta. They went to Rashee Rice. They went to Kelsey. So whatever you do with these guys are going to be bet up. If you see a Kelsey at 5.5 minus 150, it's going to become 6.5 minus 140. That's just the way it's going to be with number of receptions. If you see somebody at 55.5 yards, Rashee Rice or something, he's going to become 65.5 yards. That's just the nature of the game right now when we're all chasing numbers. And I don't want to chase plus money or minus money or get involved in some of these big numbers until I set my own numbers and think about what I want to do, because otherwise I'm reactionary. I need to know what my numbers are and then match it up. And let's say I have a number at 70.5 and the number open 50.5 or something. Then you can do an alt line on receiving yards, for example. You can do one of these things where you get plus 190 that somebody's going to have 70.5 yards, especially if you think it's going to trickle up to that number anyway. So that's a long way of saying I have to set my lines first and I have to be selective and I have to know what my value point is before I chase numbers.
Just a handful of stuff I've been noticing on these pull downs on alternate lines that, and I've tweeted it out a couple of times and I noticed it again this week or last week, that there's glitches that they're giving you the same price on multiple lines. So the price on a plus 3.5 is the same as a plus 4. So obviously keep your eyes open for, any glitches along those lines where the price isn't changing. And then I think what you're saying, which is really important, is if you've missed the bus and you weren't prepared, or the market just, too fast, you can't panic and rush yourself. Just make sure that whatever you're doing, you're doing it well. There's always going to be diamonds in the rough and certain props that slip through the cracks that you're going to be able to get later anyway.
Yeah, 3 cases in point to that when you're chasing numbers. McCaffrey had 90 yards. His rushing total was between 86.5 and 90.5. Mahomes had 241 yards, I believe, passing. His number ranged from 240.5 to 245.5. Beckham's number ranged from 20.5 to 23.5. Purdy's attempts straddled the number 2. If you miss something by by 1 or 2 yards or one attempt, you will get burned. I've been there and done that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's really not a there's really not a template, so to speak, to value the differences between different numbers, or do you find a method of finding the value on the differences between? Do you have an exact value on a over 36.5 versus a over 38?
That's a huge difference for me. That would be a huge difference. Yeah, I would change the juice dramatically in terms of that kind of thing. Where it usually doesn't come into play, even though it did for Mahomes, is the difference between 240.5 and 245.5 is going to be probably like a 1 out of 20 chance that you're going to get burned on that. But who even wants to, take that 1 out of 20 chance? The difference between what you said, 36.5 and 38, is going to come up more than 10% of the time, in my opinion, in a fair game. I mean, you get these outliers where one team goes ahead 21-0 or something like that, or an injury, but that's going to come into play much more often. Number of receptions, every half reception matters, especially the days when they used to put up whole numbers, which I missed that. When they used to put up whole numbers, every half reception was a gold mine in terms of value.
Well, so each half a reception or each half a yard, the value of those, the value of the difference between 37 and 38 is going to be much different than 69 to 70 or 111 to 112, obviously. Is there a formula that you're using for that?
Whole numbers are always much more value. Just take that in consideration. The difference between 36.5 and 37.5 is not as much as the difference between 36 and 37 or 30, because then you can tie on something. And ties were a valuable asset. Look at the juice that these books are putting up when they put up a number. Sometimes it's plus 130 minus 186 the other way. The fact that they're using half numbers has created such a poor return on investment portfolio right now. It's killing the industry.
But what I'm trying to reference is if the 38 minus 110 and the 37.5, what's the 37.5? What's that value difference?
For me, it's 20 cents. It's a lot
for each half, or for that,
even on an attempt. Yeah. And for reception, it would be 50 cents, 60 cents for a half. It's that big a deal.
But what if you're dealing with something, but it's not going to be that on a prop that's 111 to 113.5?
111 to 113.5 for what?
Or 111 to 112, and for a 1.5 difference for higher numbers versus lower numbers.
Are you talking about reception yards or something when you're getting that
just
high?
Any number. I mean,
any number. Yeah, it's not going to be that much, but every time you get burned by a half a yard, I mean, I wouldn't do it. I would always try to take the number that's more favorable and lay a little bit more juice. But yeah, I don't want to lay 20 cents more juice. Certainly not from 111 to 112.5. It's worth like 3 cents juice or 4 cents juice. But would I take the 112.5? No, I would still take the 111. On the under, on an over, for example, obviously, whichever way, again, I want the better number over the better juice. I just won't play it if I don't like the juice change.
I think to answer this question, I think Kansas City was undervalued, and I think Baltimore just imploded with pure and utter incompetence. I think Baltimore was still a very good team. One game does not summarize a team necessarily. What do you think?
Yeah, if you look back at the money line, let's say the money line closed at roughly minus 200 or something. What would that imply? That Baltimore would win 2 out of every 3 games they played, right?
Yeah.
Minus 200. Well, I think in that respect, Baltimore was overvalued, because I think Baltimore would win to the extent where the money line should have been lower than that. And maybe a little bit about that is retrospect, because I liked Baltimore, and so I thought that that they were a good play. But in retrospect, I think if they played 10 times, Baltimore would still win 6 to 7 times, 6 to 6.5 times. So it's close to that still for me.
I wanted to get back to this question here. Ben Johnson, good fit
Oh,
in
yeah.
Washington.
Thanks for bringing that up. We could spend a couple minutes on that. I know we're running long, but he's going somewhere.
Do you think he's a good fit in Washington?
I think he's a better fit in Seattle. Him and McDonald, yeah. I think he's a better fit in Seattle because he can develop schemes. Remember, the offensive line has 4 starters that have played 1 or 2 years. They have Geno Smith, who's decent but has limitations. They have a second-year wide receiver and 2 really good wide receivers. They have excellent. They have 3 tight ends. It's a very strong tight end room, and of course, they have 2 running backs. What you want to do is maximize the play out of the offensive line. And he's seen good offensive line, obviously, in Detroit. You want to maximize their strengths because as a unit right now, they're still figuring things out in Seattle for the offensive line.
Well, how this is a question that I have myself. We just don't know until we see it in action. How much of a difference do you think Ben Johnson's going to have being gone? How much is that going to affect that Lions offense next season?
Probably more so in the first half of the year than the second half of the year. And then you either make adjustments or you find out like Philly did when they had new coordinators offensively and defensively that they missed their 2 guys. I think there is an adjustment, just the same way there is an adjustment when Bieniemy left Kansas City. And what I'm saying is that maybe they're not making maybe the offense does miss Bieniemy a little bit because he was an in-your-face guy. He challenged his receivers and so on. You're getting used to a new person. I think the quarterback coach, when he promotes to offensive coordinator, is more seamless than any other promotion, though.
You would think, I mean, God, you would think when you lose these offensive coordinators that are doing so well, or defensive coordinators, and they're hiring these new coordinators to come in, how do you think they broach the subject of continuity versus, letting the new person legitimately start over? I mean, how do you weigh the two?
I think it's not just a sports decision, but it's a management decision. When you have a new COO, when you have a new high-level supervisor or something like that, you sit down with your staff. In this case, you sit down with your players and you watch a lot of film, and then you go and you talk to this guy. Okay, Josh Reynolds, here's what you did well. Here's what you didn't do well. Here's what I want to change up. Here's what I want to incorporate. Are you comfortable with that? This is the way we're going. This is what your homework assignment is. I think you sit down with these guys as a group and individually, and you work with those people and you make them understand what new concepts you're going to incorporate, and it's for their benefit.
Yeah, it's that was my biggest fear. I think I mentioned it to you before the season started, but I got a little brainwashed is the wrong word, but really supportive and appreciative of his talents. There was a handful of videos breaking down, how talented his schemes were and how hard they were to defend and such. And as much as I love Dan Campbell, I don't believe he's what we consider as a top-notch coach, so to speak, if that makes any sense. There's this 2022 video of him in summer. He stopped practice and he's pleading his case and his dedication and his goals to the players and explaining. It's an awesome listen, where he's like, listen, this is what we have to do. We have to be prepared before the season. We can't be getting into shape, by week 8, and he goes on and on and on about the importance of the off season, hardest time to really be motivated type period. And the way he speaks to the teammates, all these videos of him in the locker room, it's clear that emotionally he's top notch. There probably isn't a better coach in the league that can necessarily inspire players like he's able to. But when you talk about the X's and O's, I've got no confidence in him. And I was sitting there going, if I own the Detroit Lions, there's no way in hell I'm letting Ben Johnson go. I don't care how much I have to pay. I don't know how I have to work it out. Whether I even before the season started wondering whether is there a way where you could have coaches, or would you ever consider dumping Campbell? I mean, you can't now. He had too good of a season. Don't get me wrong, but Ben Johnson's just too freaking important to let go. If I owned the Lions, I would bring him in the office and say, "What's it going to take? Let's get this job finished."
Well, as a leader of men, whether it be in business or whether it be on the football field, you want to groom your subordinates to become head coaches. You want that coaching tree to go. You don't want to, it's a good feeling when you develop them to be leaders in their own right. So I don't think Campbell or any other coach, while as much as they want to keep the people, would hold them back. And they would want to believe as teachers that they can develop the next person up, the next man up in those positions. Injuries aside, to me, the mark of a good coach, the mark of the Pete Carrolls, the Bill Cowers, the Mike Tomlins, the Andy Reids, and so on, is your team better? Injuries aside again, is your team better at the end of the year than they were at the beginning of the year? Did you teach fifth rounders to be third rounders? Did you teach third rounders to be first rounders? Did your collection of free agents become a collection of team members? That's how I judge the coaching.
This is an awesome stat. Have you seen this before? The team to score last wins has cashed in 14 straight Super Bowls.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. So you had a situation in each of the last two this past weekend where the team that scored last lost both games. It's not a Super Bowl, but it was an all or nothing. Win and you're in, lose and you're out. So nobody's, in the regular season, if you're winning 40-10, you're obviously going to rest your players. But in the conference title games, you're not going to rest your. In both instances yesterday. And I think, let me make one more thing about that thing. You mentioned, Cris, earlier that these games have been close. The lines have been close. We're not seeing, as many blowouts lately and stuff like that. It's blowouts where the last team to score is often the team behind because it's all done. It's 40-14 and stuff like that. When you have close games, you can understand it more, the team that scores last and so on. I don't know if there's a sample size enough to make me ever lay that much money.
I had this in date order and now I don't anymore, so I can't quickly look. I'll fix it for the next time. But all right, well, I think we've babbled long enough. The goal of these get-togethers is not to sell anything, to get you to like, subscribe, or anything. It's legitimately, Ron and I just shooting the breeze and bouncing ideas off of each other, very similar to what we did before we did this show. The viewer questions is a nice little add-on, and obviously we round the rough edges of what we would talk about if there weren't other people listening or watching. But we don't care if the show goes 5 hours or 20 minutes. We're going to talk about what we want to talk about as long as we feel it has value. And hope you guys find the same. Nobody wants to look at a podcast time ahead of time. Oh, 2 hours. But
yeah, I know.
I can't believe it's an hour and 46 minutes. It goes by like that if you're getting stuff done.
Yeah. See, the problem is it's a point counterpoint. Originally, I said, Chris, let's make this 45 minutes, in general, moving forward. And then at the hour and 20-minute mark, we're bringing up something that's very important that we haven't even figured out. And we say, yeah, we really need to process this. We need to talk this out. So we talked it out. It just happened to be in the hour and 15-minute or the hour and 20th minute.
It really fits into the category of networking. I mentioned this with the NCAA football, where I would be reaching out to people, not for picks, but to find out any information that I was unaware of, and kind of looking for alignments. And when I didn't get alignments, I would then I would want to reevaluate whether I want to have that position and stuff. But the more people you talk to, the more you regurgitate ideas. You get these slight little comments back, and it just makes you think about different things. And as far as this, who's going to win or lose this game, I don't think that's going to be more than 2% of our focus. Is that going to be more than 2% of your focus? Who wins this game, other than from how you're going to attack a rolling strategy on props and how they might correlate how you see the games playing out? Because this is going to be a coin flip game. You agree?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll uncover something that makes it not a coin flip game, but it's a Super Bowl, so you have a lot of recreational action. But if you have 60 or 70 props like me, the sum total does not become recreational anymore. So you got a lot of stuff going on. So you have to manage your money that way. It's the challenge of trying to put the pieces together and hoping you're right and feeling good about it. Because it's in the big scheme of things, it's only one game, and no handicapper is ever judged on any one game or any 1 week even. Some would argue not even any 1 year. So it's just one game, but it's a really nice, neat challenge to see whether or not we can get inside the coaching heads and figure this out.
I want to mention something also about chasing the heavy prices in props or alternate lines. That's where the parlays really come in handy, because somebody that's anti-parlay will sit there and preach and say, just bet it straight up. You're getting the same thing anyway. Well, no, you're not, because if you're betting minus 300s or minus 400s or minus 500s, there's an entirely different amount of money that you have to either use up that you posted or of your available credit. So parlaying gives you more exposure for a lower price. And that's why they're such an important part of what I'm doing, because I can integrate those high-priced bets into an even money bet and get a reasonable parlay price instead of laying some huge price.
Okay, sir.
Right. Okay.
We'll be back next week, and we'll focus on some X's and O's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind getting together. If something comes up Thursday, Friday, we're worth talking about, maybe we'll pop up. If you just reach out to me, Ron. We'll do some 20-minute thing that's really 40 minutes on the fly. If I feel like.
All right. Enjoy the rest of the week. Do your work.
Thanks, everybody, for your questions and stuff. I really appreciate it.